everyone, good evening. I'm Pinagrajan Kunalan, the moderator for today's discussion regarding dioxin toxicity. So today we'll be discussing about dioxin and how this dioxin toxicity is happening in the natural environment. Mr. Dani, will you like to explain about the background of dioxins and how does dioxin toxicity happen in the natural environment, specifically with regards to aquatic ecosystems? Mr. Dani?
Yes, Ms. Sortina, with pleasure. Dioxins are a group of chemically related compounds that are pesticide and environmental pollutants, and they accumulate in the food chains, mainly the fatty tissue of animals. The chemical name for dioxin is 2,3,7,8 tetrachlorobenzopyridioxine, or TCDD. Dioxins are highly toxic and can cause reproductive and development problems, damage the immune system, interfere with hormones, and also cause cancer. Source of dioxin contamination for environmental we can find on industrial process, manufacturing process including smelting, herbicide and pesticide, but can also result from natural process such as volcanic eruption and forest fire. That's all for me, Mr. Tina. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Danny, for the very clear but very brief explanation. That is wonderful, as we have idea right now what dioxins are and how dioxin toxicity is happening in the natural environment. More than 90% of humans are exposed to dioxins through food and dairy products and fish as well. Mr. Ridwan, will you like to explain on dioxin exposure and which group of people are highly exposed to dioxin toxicity?
Sure, Mr. Tina, thanks for the opportunity. As in the exposure pathway, firstly, dioxin bioaccumulate in the adipose tissue and can be found in most persons. And then, because dioxin causes cancer in some animals, human exposure is concerned. In last one, chloracne is the only overall clinical scene of dioxin exposure in human. And then, who's at risk of exposure? Number one, workers in the chemical industry might have increased likelihood of exposure. Number two, clinical effects from dioxin exposure have been seen primarily after major industrial accident involving these compounds. And last one, number three, fetuses and nursing infants may be at increased risk of dioxin exposure if the mothers have been exposed. Mr. Tina, that's all for me.
Thanks for the explanation, Mr. Ridwan. I understand from your explanation that humans are highly exposed to dioxin toxicity as dioxins are highly toxic. They can cause a lot of damages to the human health. Mrs. Fatin, regarding these adverse health effects on humans, will you like to explain more on the symptoms of dioxin toxicity and are the officials coming up with the treatment and management plans for these issues?
Sure, the onset of symptoms after acute exposure to dioxins can take from days to weeks, and so far public health has mentioned that chloracne and elevated liver enzyme might be noted in patients, including skin, eye, and respiratory tract irritation. Till date, there is no antidote for dioxin toxicity, and the treatment is totally based on the symptoms assigned, and the supportive care is the only therapy, but it is very important to remove the patient from the source of the exposure. For the source of the exposure. For chloracne patient, treatment with diluted retinoic acid and tetracycline have been used, as well as surgery if needed. Basically, all people have background exposure and a certain level of dioxins in their body, and it is not expected to affect human health on average. However, due to the high toxic potential of dioxins, efforts are needed to reduce the current background exposure. That's all from Mr. Tina.
Thanks, Mrs. Fatin. What I understand from what you're saying is everyone is exposed to toxic and dioxin toxicity. However, with high toxic potential, efforts need to be undertaken to reduce the current background exposure. Am I right? So this brings us to the reality today that dioxin toxicity is happening everywhere around the world, and it is the worst scenario where it happens to breast milk that is being fed to babies. Mr. Ikram, can you enlighten us regarding this particular case study that has been conducted at Italy?
Thank you, Mr. Tina. Briefly, there was a case study in 2013 by Blanco, which based on the sample collected from a highly industrial area that located near Taranto, Italy. This study was based on the breast milk as the sample, which had been collected from 15 first pregnant women, or we can call it as primiparous women, who were living in that area. This study found that some of the breast milk samples contained with high concentration of dioxin, which in this case it exceeds the tolerable limit set out by the WHO, where it should be in the range 1 to 4 picogram. Thus, as the breast milk later will be consumed by the baby, the dioxin might be transmitted from the mother to the baby This can be related from what has been explained by Danny and Ridwan previously. I think that's all from me, Ms. Tina.
Thanks, Mr. Ikram. And lastly, Ms. Hazwan, will you like to share to us regarding the case study that has been conducted in University of Michigan regarding dioxin exposure?
Okay, Mr. Tina. Well, the case report is about a follow-up investigations of a case with high serum concentrations of pentachlorodibenzofuran. The study is motivated by concern about possible human exposure to dioxin-contaminated sediment in Titabawasi River and believed to be the result of historical industrial activities of the chemical company. So as the result of this case study, one individual with highest adjusted serum level of penta-CDF reported that a unique exposure history that involved in consuming homegrown beef and vegetables in the river floodplain. Experts state that dominant source of exposure to dioxin-like compound in the general populations is food, which is more than 90%, mostly by consuming animal products. Farmers and other who consume food raised in contaminated area are at risk of exposure. Lastly, the result in this study indicates that animals and crops should not be raised for human consumption in areas contaminated with dioxin. That's all.
Thanks everyone for all your outputs. I really appreciate your outputs. In a nutshell, I believe that dioxin toxicity is something that is real and is happening everywhere around the world, and we should combat this toxicity for the welfare of mankind and the natural environment. I personally believe that if we take the right steps right now, it will be never too late to stop dioxin toxicity happening all around the world. As the famous saying goes, prevention is better than cure, so I believe that. Thank you.